Is a new year, same old content. That's right, for the first episode of 2023, we are redesigning the eBay product page, a recommendation by one of my lovely subscribers. And taking a look at it here, there's clearly a lot of room for improvement. I'm looking at a simple little laptop here, and man, there's just a lot of text kind of crammed into one space above the fold here. This is a classic case of all this information is important, so we have to give it to the user ASAP. But if everything's important, nothing is important. And additionally, we've got some product metadata just below the fold that doesn't really seem to be important enough to take up this space. And then we have several other blocks that are just recommending other computers. They seem to all be doing the same thing. Definitely going to tidy this up a bit. Our style guide here, as always, with our brand guidelines, the fun little eBay colors that we're going to use for semantic danger warning and success states. They're standard accent blue. And I'm using an interesting font, or I guess a more fun font, called Cuesta Sans, that we'll be using for both the header and the body fonts here. So as always, we've got our user stories here. As a user, what do I want to do? I want to learn whether or not a given product purchase makes sense to me, and there's lots of criteria that kind of fulfill that evaluation for me. I want to view other similar products that might pique my interest. When I'm ready, I want to add the product to my cart or make an offer / bid on it. It's an auction website after all. And then I want to search for other products and just kind of continue browsing. So, gonna get stuck in here, see what we come up with. Okay, there's a lot of opportunity here to make this a much more functional UI. So, here we go. Pretty interesting header here. Still gonna skip over it, but the main change I made here was really just to focus the navigation around search more, much like Google does, like the main user experience of using Google is searching, so it's all you can do, and just kind of ditching the whole category filters altogether. I feel like this is just a simpler way for people to find what they're looking for. And here's the start of what's going to be a theme throughout this entire redesign. I'm really toying with trying to fix this header because you don't want the title to be too long lengthwise. And also this name is just really hard to read. All the different characteristics and attributes listed in the title. But ultimately, I come to the conclusion that on eBay, sellers are incentivized to put all this product information directly into the title itself so that it's found on search engines. So we keep the long header and just restrict the container width instead. And here I'm trying a more experimental layout for a product page in an e-commerce store. But this just goes to show you the value of information hierarchy. Since this text is big and bold, it doesn't really matter where I put it horizontally on the screen. As long as there's nothing else competing for your attention, your eyes are going to go straight to that first. And that's exactly what I want the user to do with this UI. Another rule of thumb here is whenever you have multiple call to actions in the same container, you never want them all to be one saturated color. You always want one call to action, the thing you really want the user to do, to be that nice saturated accent color, and everything else should be subdued to some degree. Here you're seeing me make a terrible mistake, and that's giving the user options to select different attributes on their products, which isn't really how eBay works. It's generally a seller with one very specific item with a very specific set of attributes who's trying to sell it to other people. So eventually I'm going to scrap this, and I might just skip ahead to the part where I do to spare you watching through it again. Veterans on the channel here will note that I'm using a different heuristic for displaying label value pairs this time. And that's because I'm trying to display a little bit more of a stacked structure to the user. And I don't know how many label value pairs there will be on any given product. So using the small label big value heuristic is kind of challenging because it forces a very specific aesthetic onto the UI. And if you don't have control of the number of items there, it can get out of hand real quick. So this simple kind of table layout works much better. And it's much more flexible rather. And I felt like the About This Seller block on the existing eBay UI was kind of lackluster. I mean, at the end of the day, you're buying from normal people on eBay, right? It's usually a peer-to-peer sale. So if I was buying something, I would kind of want to know a little bit more about this person and like their track history, right? So I kind of embellished this a little bit more in this UI here, and also gave them a little spot for displaying some text, a text profile almost, just kind of welcoming them to their shop and everything like that. And then of course, as we alluded to at the start of this video, I'm making the reviews a little more prominent here. Obviously, when you buy something, peer reviews are kind of so important, right? That social proof is essential. So it's kind of strange to me that you had to scroll quite a ways down to see it on the existing UI. Here you're watching my poor designer soul just burn to a crisp as I try 2 million different variations of the review content and the review attribution arrangement here. Like I've said before, oftentimes in design, you just have to try lots of different potential layouts, keeping to the principles of good UI design, and eventually you'll arrive at the correct solution. So for the sake of time, I'm gonna skip forward to the finished, nice polished review list. But just know that this took quite a few iterations to get it right. And then finally, this is an auction website, but there's no way to just bid on something. You can only buy out. So here I'm copying the heuristic that they had on their existing UI, where you could swap between different types of the shop, but I'm just moving it to where I feel like it's more appropriate, right next to where you actually commit the action, because really the only meaningful changes here are how you want to interact with this product. Do you want to get the brand new one, the pre-owned one, or do you want to participate in an auction for a pre-owned one and start bidding that way? So putting it right next to the controls, I think, makes more sense semantically, and ultimately will make it easier for the users to understand what they need to do there. All right, gonna stop there. And ultimately, again, I still feel like there's a couple of things missing from this. Notably, I'm not 100% sold on putting the images on the left-hand side of the UX, and then I'm not too sure about the old auction versus buying experience and whether or not that could be polished up a bit. But overall, I think that the information architecture here is a significant leap forward. Here we can see the previous UI where there's just a lot of information going on, being fired at you at once, just a whole bunch of text. I feel a little bit intimidated when I look at this, and I'm not necessarily sure I want to read through everything that's here to get the information I need. And all the information about the product and reviews are much farther lower than I would hope them to be if I was trying to actually make a purchasing decision. And then, of course, here we have the new UI, which does none of that, and instead it displays the same amount of information, but just kind of architected in a way such that the important stuff floats to the top, and then if users want to dive in a little more to some more detail, they can do so in the by clicking on the controls here. So I think overall this is a significant leap forward for eBay, but of course there's always room for improvement. So let me know if you'd change anything in the comments below. And if there's any other UI you'd like me to take a stab at, I've got a whole new year to get through some videos. So appreciate your time, guys. Hope you found this useful, and I'm going to go eat my lovely banana. Have a great week.